when it comes to like internet trolls and stuff like that, like how do you handle it?
And I just fucked him up so bad, and he ran outside and threw up and never came back. If I put a video out and it's a 1 out of 10 that's killing it, getting a ton of views, I don't give a fuck what you say about me. I'm like, I don't give a shit, man. This video got 200,000 views in 3 days. Suck my dick. And I don't even know the names of this shit. Like, I'm not saying I made it up, because I didn't make it up, but I literally learned it from watching Clay Guida in the UFC.
Oh.
Like, you know how he'll always like hug the legs, like around the knees? Right. It's not, you know where to find me. Well, guess what? They probably never show up.
One piece of advice to a brand new white belt, what would it be and why?
My advice to a brand new white belt would be...
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. Your host, Travis. Today, I have a very special guest, and Finn Mckenty. How you doing today, man?
Never been better. Best day of my life, because I'm here talking to you.
That's probably the best answer I've ever gotten from a guest, so I appreciate that. So, Finn, I mean, I've been a big fan of yours. We'll kind of just jump straight into it. Been a fan of yours. I think the first video I saw of yours was the Ronnie Radke video a couple years ago. And I was like, oh, who is this guy? And being from Vegas, I was like, I love Escape the Fate. And so I watched the video, and that was like probably about, 3-4 years ago that video came out. And I didn't even know you did jiu-jitsu until Jordan Pressinger was like, oh, yeah, Finn's a purple belt. And I was like, holy crap, that's super cool, man. So I would love to hear your story on how you got into jiu-jitsu and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I lied. I've never trained a day in my life. I just thought it would sound cool. I got into jiu-jitsu way back in the day, back in the 90s, back in like the old school UFC days, like late 90s. A friend of mine, so I watched, the early UFCs like everyone else when they came out, and I thought it was amazing. And then when I moved to college in like 96, a friend of mine was like, oh yeah, it's this, those guys are doing this Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff. And I was like, oh, that's what it is. And so he sort of told me about it. I didn't really get a chance to train until a couple years after that. I think the first time I trained was in 99 under a guy named Marcelo Alonso, who I think is like one of the first like Carlson like black belts, I think.
Yeah, we're under him. My school's under Marcelo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, no, you worry, my baby. It's okay. That's what he said when he shows up fucking 45 minutes late. It's okay. It's okay. No, you worry, my baby. Like, actually, we're 45 minutes late. But anyway, so I didn't train there for very long, but it was enough that I thought it was, it was cool, and just life gets in the way and stuff. When I started training more seriously was in Ohio, maybe around 2004 or 5, I think. This was like the peak of like kind of the Rich Franklin, kind of George Gurgel kind of era. And I lived in Cincinnati, which, those guys are close to it and stuff. And so there was like a really big like regional MMA scene back then. And I started doing MMA, and this was back, it was back in the 2000s and stuff. So I don't even know what like the quality of, God bless my training partners. They're awesome. One of them ended up fighting in the UFC actually, but, I don't know. It's hard for me to say what our training, like I felt like it was awesome at the time. And like, I learned a lot. Like probably a 2004 blue belt is probably like a 2024, like 3 class white belt. You know what I mean? Cause just people are so much better now. But so I did MMA for a couple years at that place, which was really cool and fun. And I enjoyed it a lot. And then took a lot more time off, and then eventually got my purple belt here in Seattle at a place called Kindred JiuJitsu up in Edmonds, Washington, which is awesome. And I loved it. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to train for about a year because we moved and my hands are fucked up, and, all that other kind of stuff that happens. But that's the story.
Yeah, I know Kindred. So they always have a big like name seminars there and whatnot. Yep. There's a pro MMA fighter that goes there, that Duck Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh yeah, Austin. Yeah, he's awesome. I used to train with him all the time. He's awesome.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Really, really, really good leg locker. Kind of guy that like when you roll with him, you're like, I'm probably gonna get a bloody lip after this one because he's gonna cross face the living shit out of me. But it's those are the roles where you learn a lot.
So what was it like taking that break and then coming back to jiu-jitsu in like the early 2000s? Was there like anything in your mind like, I'm just going to get back into it, or was there like some hesitation?
No, I didn't hesitate at all because, especially after doing like MMA and stuff, I got the shit beat out of me so many times. It's like jiu-jitsu is like way less stress than MMA. you know, so there wasn't any hesitation or anything other than just like, well, I haven't trained for a long time, so I'm going to suck even worse, which I did. But, you know, it's like, it is what it is. You know, you take some time off, you come back. Just the thing that's just amazing to me is, especially after coming back, I started again, maybe around 2018 or 19, I think. And just the level of evolution that happened to jiu-jitsu between like 2007 or whatever it is, and that 10 years after it is crazy.
What was the biggest thing that you noticed that was different?
Well, all the Danaher stuff, basically.
Hmm.
You know, and I think Kindred was a little bit early to that because of Austin. I think he, Duck Jitsu, like, I think he was one of the first guys in the Northwest to kind of like learn a lot of that stuff. But just, there was like Japanese guys that did that stuff, you know, like even Ari and stuff like that back in the 2000s. But like nobody was hitting fucking, you know, all these like, you know, just all those like leg entanglements and stuff. Nobody was hitting that like in live rolls, you know, in the, like we would kind of fuck around. We're like, oh, we saw this in Pride, let's fuck around and do it on each other. But like nobody actually thought it worked, you know.
Why'd you stop training MMA and just go strictly to jiu-jitsu?
I don't want to get punched in the face anymore, you know. I just don't. I mean, I'm old, and like the thing with like that regional MMA scene in Ohio back then is like, it's like the reason I never took like a fight there is because the guys there were such just like fucking badasses that it could, you could be fighting somebody, you could both be 0-0, and you could be fighting some like D1 wrestler, you know, that was Rich Franklin's training partner that is just going to blow your fucking head off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like some Militich guy or something that'll just rip your spine out of your head, you know? And I just don't like respect, but like, I just don't want that kind of like intensity in my life at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And you were, at the time, you were a graphic designer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you ever feel that jiu-jitsu kind of attracted to you more because of like your creative side of like your personality? You're like, oh man, there's a lot of like learning here. There's a lot of like, I can apply myself and make my own way in this sport.
I'd say it's probably because of my autism.
I don't know if I should laugh at that one or not.
But I mean, that's really what it is, because, you know, I am autistic, and like, you know, a lot of autistic people are like really systems oriented thinkers. And so jujitsu, obviously it's like never ending puzzle inside a puzzle inside a puzzle inside a puzzle. And so, you know, it engages my brain in a way that, you know, other things like other physical activity doesn't as much. Like, that's what I like about it is, you know, you like, you roll for an hour and a half and like, it feels like it was 2 seconds because,
Yeah.
you know, you don't even realize how exhausted you are because you're thinking the whole time, as opposed to like, if you're running, just like, I'm bored.
No, that's true, because I know when I first started, I would film myself a lot more than I do now, and I would sit there and review it in my head before watching the video. Like, man, I was stuck. I was like in mount for, it felt like the entire round, and then I rewatched the video. I'm like, it was literally maybe 15 seconds. Like, it's like I was completely lost in the moment. Like, this is so, especially
Right.
when you get to that point where it's like someone has like a good knee on belly or just has like suffocating pressure. You're just sitting there thinking like, should I just tap to get out of this? Because this is just lasting forever. How do you overcome that?
Those situations where you just feel like you're fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, my point of view is like, unless I'm like actually afraid I'm going to get injured, like, I mean, I'm never going to tap, like, no matter how bad it sucks, like, no matter, like, if it hurts or it's uncomfortable, that's fine. If I'm going to get injured, that's another thing. I'll tap then, obviously. But other than that, it's like, well, I mean, I think about how many times, like in fights or in matches, like, I mean, how, or just rolls, like, how many times have you, like, you know, been 95% of the way to getting a rear naked or something like that, and you're squeezing the fucking shit out of them, and you're like, you just can't do it, you know? And if the guy tapped, he would have tapped, but, you know, he just hangs in there long enough and you just give up because you're like, all right, I guess I don't have it. So I just try to be that guy in those situations. And it's like, if I can just learn, you know, how to shift by a quarter of an inch such that the pressure isn't quite there, then that's a win for me. I learned something. You're not going to learn if you just tap to it. You're not going to learn from that.
Yeah, and to your point too, it builds like that mental resilience that a lot of like early jiu-jitsu athletes don't have, right? They'll get in a lot of these positions where they're like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. And they'll just tap,
Yep.
or like a submission will be started and they'll tap to it. And then they're like, oh, you were going to get it anyways. Like, well, that's not the way
Yeah.
to think about it. Like, that's not, you gotta try. Most people, especially when you roll with higher belts, they're just going to let you work.
Yeah.
And then if they get a submission, they'll try to let you come out of it. You know what I mean?
Heel hooks are the only thing that that's a different deal. Other than that, I'll tap early to those, but anything else, I try to hold out as long as I can.
Have you ever competed in jiu-jitsu?
Just a little bit, and I totally got smoked, which is fine because everyone was like way younger than me and stuff, and whatever. I expected it.
Yeah. I competed one time, and it was a big eye opener. Now I can see why people say like you should do it, because it makes you realize like where the holes are in your game a lot more than just on the mat. So during this year break since you moved, have you been looking for academies, or have you been doing like anything jiu-jitsu related outside of actually going to a class?
Yeah. So there's only one place that's like sort of close enough to train, and they don't do no-gi, or they have like no-gi once a week or something. And I'm not one of these people, like I think gi and no-gi are both cool, whatever. I probably prefer no-gi a little bit, but the problem is like I broke both of my pinkies, and so my grips are really weak there, and that like it just fucks my gi grips. And I also get a lot of, and like really, I mean, because with gi, all the gripping is those two fingers, whereas with no-gi, it's here, so I'm good. And I've like broken my fingers a little bit, and I just have my hands just get fucked up from gi grips. And I would like my fingers to work in the future. So unfortunately, if the only choice I have is gi, I just can't do it for the sake of my hands.
Do you ever do like grip training or anything like that to like try to strengthen it, or is it just to the point now where it's
like I don't have full mobility, like I can't extend this pinky.
Oh yeah,
like they're broken.
What happened?
Just jujitsu.
Dude, I feel like fingers are like one of the number one things like people get injured on. Like one of my best friends, his pinky, same thing, completely just snapped backwards. And they're like, one of our buddies, a brown belt, just pulled it back into a slot, and same thing. Now he's got like a strong hand pinky. You know what I mean? It's just, this thing is horrible, and it's never been the same ever since. He even had it go rebroken at the hospital, and it was nothing that they could do.
Yeah, I went to the doctor and asked him about it, and he's like, "Oh, yep, you probably got some permanent deformity there." And I was like, well, "All right then."
Is that it?
Yeah.
There's like, okay. You can do. Were those the worst injuries that you've had in jiu-jitsu?
I also I forget which is the ligament on the inside of your knee. Is that the MCL?
I think so. Yeah.
I popped that one once, which sucked. And like that was like 3 or 4 years ago, and like I still have a little bit of scar tissue or something from that. And I also popped like the cartilage in a rib or something like that. I don't know exactly what it was. I got it x-rayed, but I have like a permanent like weirdo little lump in my rib from that. That fucking sucked.
How does that affect like because you strength and condition train in your garage quite a bit. Like how has these injuries like affected your day-to-day life?
Not they don't matter for that. The only one that matters is like for jiu-jitsu is like the pinkies, which sucks and I know people are like, oh, we'll just use no-gi grips in the gi. I'm like, sure, but like that I'm not interested in playing on like hard mode. You know what I mean? Like if you can only use no-gi grips when you're in the gi, like you're going to get fucked up, unless you're fucking like, oh, Jean-Jacques Machado. Okay, cool. I'm not Jean-Jacques Machado. Good for him.
Of course, let's go. Yeah, him.
Yeah.
There's also a Korobo been training since he's like 8 years old.
Oh, so just be one of the best of all time? Got it. Okay, cool.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like, you have a big YouTube channel. I mean, your second channel, well, you have 3, right? You have your podcast clips, you have your second channel, your name, and then Punk Rock NBA. When it comes to like internet trolls and stuff like that, like how do you handle it? Is it like just you're like whatever, like it doesn't bother you at all? You're a little bit older, you've been doing it for a while. Like has like training ever like kind of like, look, this person wouldn't say it in my face, and if they did, I'd probably mess them up anyway, so it doesn't really bother you? Or like how do you handle trolls on the internet?
Yeah, I mean pretty much that. It's like what are you gonna do? It's like, it's fucking annoying sometimes, but It's like that's sort of what you sign up for. Mostly, I think it's funny. I do wish that you could just fight people face to face, because I'm not going to say that I would like. I'm not going to say that I'm sure there's someone out there that's a fucking brown belt or something that kicked my ass, but probably not too many of them, you know? And I wish people could settle things. Like I had, you know who Andre Fili is from UFC? Yeah. So I had him on my podcast, and he was just talking about how you just fight people all the time. Just like, just like, I'm in favor of that. If someone wants to talk shit, then fight.
Yeah.
Or shut the
Tom
fuck up.
DeBoss always drops his address. He's all like, look, dude, you can literally come to my academy. Like, if you talk the shit, like, just come on over.
Right. It's not, you know where to find me. Well, guess what? They probably never show up.
That's funny. Did you feel like it was easier to deal with like these people's opinions and all this BS on the internet when you were like a smaller YouTuber, or now is it easier now that you're a bigger one?
Yeah, it's easier just because, you just get a thicker skin over time. And it's like, I mean, I've heard literally every awful thing you could possibly say about me. I've heard hundreds of times. So it's kind of like, if that's the best you can do, then that's nothing I haven't seen before.
It's so crazy that people in the music space are so opinionated too. Like they're so willing to like have this dogma mentality, and we see it in jiu-jitsu too. Like,
for sure.
You and I talked about it on Instagram. Like you'll do a move on Instagram or show something, and people are quick to just try to tear you down. I'm like, I don't even know you, bro.
Right. Yeah, everyone's a fucking expert.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, what is like it like when you put a piece of content out there and it doesn't hit your audience the way that you think it should be, or like you're like, oh man, this is a 10 out of 10 or whatever. Like, what do you do?
Well, I mean, there's a YouTuber named Turkey Tom that tweeted this a couple years ago that I thought was pretty funny. Said it well. 10 out of 10, worse than cancer diagnosis. So for anybody who doesn't know, in the YouTube app, it on the home page, if you're logged in as someone who owns the channel, it'll rank your last video out of 10. So 1 out of 10 is good, 10 out of 10 is bad. And so you log in and you see that 10 out of 10 is just takes the fucking wind out of your sails. That's way worse than any kind of troll or anything like that. Like if I put a video out and it's a 1 out of 10 that's killing it, getting a ton of views, I don't give a fuck what you say about me. I'm like, I don't give a shit, man. This video got 200,000 views in 3 days. Suck my dick. Say whatever the fuck you want about me.
That's funny. It's like I'd rather take a knee on belly than see a 10 out of 10.
Exactly.
Just like double gi grip, like collar grip, drive that knee through my soul.
Right. Knee on sternum.
Just pile driving, man.
Yep.
I hate seeing that. I'm like, oh, okay, well that's a sign that this was a piece of garbage. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about like when you go back to jiu-jitsu, maybe making jiu-jitsu content? Like I was telling my buddy, I didn't even know you did jiu-jitsu because like none of your Instagram stuff really ever mentions it, or and I've never, all the videos I've seen, you've never really mentioned it either. Have you ever thought about doing a little bit of jiu-jitsu content when you go back to it?
Well, possibly, maybe, but maybe not. Number one, I don't want yet another thing for people to argue with me about. It's like, can there just be one part of my life? This is why I don't really ever talk. I never talk in detail about like lifting weights or anything for the same reason. Because I know somebody like, oh, your fucking, toes are turned out too far. You should be no more than 45. You're like, shut the fuck up. Jesus. Nitpicking every little fucking thing. So that's number one. Number two is like, I mean, I'm not good. Like I'm a purple belt, but I'm one of those purple belts that's like, I'm the rest round. You know what I mean? But because like purple is such a weird belt, is, you can have someone like me that's like an old hobbyist purple belt that's going to get fucked up by like, the blue belts, the young blue belts that compete. They'll fuck me up, but then there's also purple belts, that will fuck up like a lot of black belts. It's just, once you hit purple, it's like all bets are off. The person could basically be a schmuck like me, or they could be a fucking killer, and you really don't know.
Real quick, this episode is brought to you by our Patreon and YouTube members. Thank you guys so much for committing $5 a month for exclusive and early content, and you get priority Q&A and you will get secret live streams. And also, you have the opportunity to get your roles reviewed by myself and a past guest or one of my high-level friends that can tell you what you're doing wrong, what your goals are, and where you should be focusing. Also, you are directly supporting the podcast and allowing me to keep improving and keeping my editor Dan. So thank you guys so much to my patrons and to the YouTube memberships. If you guys want to join for $5 a month, link is down below. Thank you so much. Back to the show. Peace. Yeah, I always hear once you get purple, it's like jiu-jitsu. Like you're pretty much there for the long haul.
Yeah.
It's like, and so I'm still a blue belt now. I've been a blue belt for about 5 years, and I was talking to Jordan about putting stuff out there, and I was like, I just feel weird because being a blue belt, even doing a podcast and like talking about my experience, I'm like, who wants to listen to a random freaking blue belt? Like he's like, well, once you get your purple, honestly, people kind of view you differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? After you got your purple belt, well, first of all, what was it like getting your purple belt? What was that experience like? Were you expecting it?
No, I wasn't at all. Kyle, my coach, was like, okay, before we leave, I gotta say something I should have said a while ago. And I thought he was going to say something like the gym was closing or something. I was like, oh shit.
Got something better.
Yeah, exactly. Cause this was like right after COVID kind of. And, so, that was rough for a lot of gyms and stuff. And so I was like, oh fuck. But yeah, then he gave it to me. It was awesome. Like I would say like getting my purple belt is one of the coolest accomplishments of my life. Because I mean, that's no fucking joke. Like, I mean,
No.
I certainly like, I'm not good, but purple belt is like, you're legit. If you got a purple belt, that's fucking legit. Anyway, like anybody would respect that. Like any black belt on the planet will respect that you have a purple belt. That means, you know something. Blue belt is cool too, but like to me, purple is like, that's the beginning of like really like legit, And, so yeah, it means, I mean, especially training with those guys, they're, training with like Austin and all those guys, like that's not an easy room, and I really, I miss training with those guys. Like almost all of them competed a lot, like Austin was like on Fight Pass cards at the gnarly and shit. And then, 3 days later, I'm rolling with them, and like, what an amazing opportunity,
Yeah. What is that like being in a room of like such like great athletes and stuff like that, and being a hobbyist, right? Because that's how I am too. I'm just a hobbyist, and I got to roll with Nathan Orchard, and it was just like such a different level of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
It was like incredible to me to experience someone that's just like life is devoted to the art. It's like, what goes through your mind when you're rolling with someone that's just like up there?
Survive as long as possible. And for reference, I mean, Austin's like, he's fought, I'd say 125 is kind of like his best weight. And like right now, I probably weigh 185. And, I feel like a helpless fucking baby with him. And then Kyle, the head coach there, he's huge. He's like probably 240 or something like that. And he runs like the defensive tactics program for like the King County Sheriffs and stuff, or did at the time.
Cool.
So we're training. The other thing that was cool about that place, so I trained a lot of cops because of that. So he would teach stuff, say at 8 a.m. or something like that, there'd be 40 cops in there, like, for his work stuff. And some of them would train beforehand. And, so I'd come in the morning and get to train with them and stuff like that. So it was cool to train with like, not only people who are like athletes, high level athletes, but then also people who are like training for like the purest self-defense of like literally just don't get stabbed to death by a crackhead.
Especially over in Seattle.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's just a really special kind of mix of like the most pure self-defense and, like athletes. It's like, what a cool opportunity. And I mean, really special place. I miss Kindred a lot.
A lot of people talk about like the mental health side of jiu-jitsu and how it helps so much. Taking this year off, have you noticed a switch in like your mental health or anything like that, or has lifting really kind of like kept you level-headed?
Yeah, it's pretty much replaces it. I mean, nothing's as good as jiu-jitsu, but I mean, life gets in the way. It is what it is. People, it happens. But I mean, that's like such a huge benefit of it. I used to have really bad anxiety, which I don't anymore. I would have like horrible anxiety. I would go train for an hour and a half or something, and then afterwards I'd feel like 95% better.
Yeah, my son, I have a 15-year-old son, and he hasn't trained in like a year or so because he picked up playing football. But back when we would go train together in the evenings, he would be like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I'm like, you always say that.
Yep.
And then you get there, you start rolling around, you start being active. And like, by the time we leave, you're like, that was so much fun. And it really builds like a great bond between me and him doing something very difficult. You recently had a kid. Do you plan on hopefully getting your kid into martial arts also?
Yeah, wrestling or jiu-jitsu, one or the other, or both. See
Same.
what he wants, whatever. I don't care. And if he doesn't stick with it, that's okay. But I want him to at least just try it for a while, you know, because I mean, even if he does one of those things for like 6 months, like that's a level of intensity that most people will never experience in their life. And I just think there's so much to be learned from that, from either one of those, you know, that I think is just so important for your development as a human. I mean, like the level of intensity of wrestling is like fucking crazy.
Insane.
Yeah. I mean, there was a guy at Kindred, Zach Hernandez, who was like a former D1 wrestler. And I want to say he was only a blue belt at the time or something, but he would just like toy with, you know, black belts, you know what I mean? It's like literally you could tell he's going easy on him.
Yeah.
You know, and like there was a lot of techniques he didn't know in jiu-jitsu, but he was just such a strong athlete and such a great wrestler that it's like, again, at that point you realize a belt really, you know, means something, but there's a lot
when you talk
it
about,
doesn't mean.
When you talk about like jiu-jitsu in your personal life and like say people don't know or whatever, if it gets brought up, speaking of like just between people, like, has anyone ever been like, oh, I think I could take you, Finn? Like,
I mean, no, because I don't go anywhere other than Target, Costco, and you know, the coffee shop. So no, but I mean, I like back, you know, I used to go to a lot of hardcore shows and stuff like that back in the when I was like training MMA all the time. Like, yeah, that shit happened like fairly often. And yeah, I mean, especially the type of people I was around at that time. Yeah, I mean, that there were those instances.
Man, I could only imagine in Cleveland, Ohio in the early 2000s what the hardcore scene was like. Because I got into the hardcore scene in Vegas in mid 2000s, like 2005, 2006. And I was like 130-pound, skinny, scrawny kid, hardcore dancing in skinny jeans, right? And there would be groups of guys just like crews, you know what I mean?
The
like
guys from Reno were always really gnarly.
Yeah, we had one in Vegas that was the Leathernecks, I think is what they were called, and it was like if their guys were in the pits and you got in, they was like you were getting jumped, and it was like such a horrible experience if they were at a show, and they were at some of my favorite shows. Like I saw Bring Me the Horizon in like 2005, and I was like, oh my god, like these guys are just being absolute tools right now. And now looking back, and I was like, I wish I would have trained something. Well, maybe I could have defended myself.
Cincinnati was like that, except those guys were my friends and training partners. So it wasn't an issue for me.
How do you like now seeing like how the music scene has changed and like over the years, like you talk about a lot the 20-year rule of things coming back around, and jiu-jitsu's kind of experiencing that now too. Like there was a big shift into leg locks were like the thing for a long time, and now people are kind of steering away from leg locks and kind of going back to like the very simple things. When you look at music or jiu-jitsu or whatever like that, like how do you look at the trends when they're happening? Do you kind of like laugh? You're like, oh, I remember when this was cool back in the day.
I just observe, you know, I don't judge any of these things because trends are going to come and go. And anytime there's a trend, there's some stuff about it that's going to be good and some stuff that's going to be bad. Like, you know, with leg locks, people like playing footsie and like, you know, fucking some blue belt, you know, learning crazy, you know, leg entanglement systems to, you know, fucking backside 50-50 to this, to that, you know, and like, cool, but you can't finish a Kimura, you know. On the other hand, that blue belt might catch a black belt, you know, old school black belt. They might catch him in something. So, you know, it's like anything else. There's like good and bad to it. And same with like music trends and stuff. You know, obviously any trend is going to come along and it's going to get oversaturated and ridiculous and played out. But there's going to be some aspects of that. The best artists in that genre are going to stick around and, you know, like, I mean, I remember when everyone said Bring Me the Horizon was like, you know, whatever, gay scene kid music or whatever. Those are not my words. That's what people said about them. And you remember. And,
100%.
You know,
I remember.
that's what people said in 2008, you know. and much worse. But then obviously, they stuck around and now they're considered a great band. So I just kind of try to observe it and take what's good and, let go of what's not so good.
One thing we talked about on Instagram was like the use of YouTube for people. Like we were talking about, like most people probably shouldn't watch jiu-jitsu content
Yeah.
because it's just going to distract them. How do you view jiu-jitsu content? Do you watch instructionals or other YouTube channels and stuff like that?
I used to a lot. And I would have the same experience every time of like, I would see something on YouTube and be like, oh, this is fucking cool. And like, maybe make my wife let me like try it on her a couple times or something. And like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Like, I'm going to fuck everyone up with this next time. And I go and I try it. It doesn't work. There's probably a couple little things here and there that I picked up or something, but it's like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on what's in the room, and I would do privates with people. That helped me a lot. But yeah, it's cool. Obviously there's people like Joseph Chen who like, I guess like apparently like learned his whole game from like instructionals. So obviously it works for some people. And I think it's awesome that all that stuff is out there. But I think there's a lot of people that fall into being what I would call technique collectors, just like learning a bunch of random shit rather than sort of focusing on what works. I'll say the thing that I am best at, like my whole jiu-jitsu game, the one thing I'd say I'm pretty fucking good at it, that I can give black belts trouble with this, is guard passing, specifically low passing. And I don't even know the names of this shit. Like, I'm not saying I made it up because I didn't make it up, but I literally learned it from watching Clay Guida in the UFC.
Oh,
like, you know how he'll always like hug the legs, like around the knees. I saw him do that and I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. And it fucking works for me. Like I said, I'll give black belts trouble with that. Like I'll pass their guard, they always recover usually, but like I can pass a black belt's guard with that shit. And I literally don't, nobody ever taught it to me. I just literally learned it from watching Clay Guida.
What you mentioned that you kind of surprise people with that. What is one thing that jiu-jitsu has surprised about yourself? Like you learned about yourself through training martial arts?
Well, geez, I don't know. I guess I don't know that it surprised me because I never, I don't know if there's anything that surprised me, but, I remember one time I trained for a little while in Newark, New Jersey, which is at that time, this was like 20 years ago, it was like a really fucked up place. So it was whatever on, what was it? Like, is it Broad Street in Newark? I forget the name of it, the main street through Newark. And I remember like training there and it was, like maybe 9:30 at night or something. It was like a really late class. And I just got fucking worked by everybody there for like an hour. And I was like a white belt at the time. I just got worked by everybody. And afterwards, the teachers kind of, it's like old school, kind of Newark, like Puerto Rican half gangster guy. He was like, you're not that tough, but like but you like tough mentally. And I was like, okay, I'll take that.
You're like, I think that's a compliment, man.
It's like you remember in the UFC when they would list like the strong points of the fighters, right? And sometimes they'd say durable.
The guy could get punched a lot.
Yeah, that means like no defense, but he keeps coming. Like Forrest Griffin, durable.
Yeah. What motivated you to keep training then, even through the hard times? Because I know some people they can have too many bad classes in a row and just be like, I'm done, man. Like, what's motivated you to keep training?
Autism. I guess like that's just how my brain works. I don't have a problem doing difficult, unpleasant things for a long time. It's part of the process. Although I will say, it is, you have those things in jiu-jitsu sometimes, those periods where like for 6 months, you're just like, I fucking suck.
Oh, terrible.
Nothing works. I get my ass beat in every roll. And you just got to keep going because sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. And even if it doesn't feel like you're getting better, you are. And there's going to be someone new that comes along or something like that. And you're going to fuck them up. And you'll be like, oh, okay, I guess I was learning something from getting my ass beat all those times. So if you're in one of those kind of low periods, just keep going.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, even if your kid does like 6 months of wrestling or jujitsu, whatever, I always tell people after 6 months, there's such a hockey spike
Yes.
or a hockey stick of like confidence, skill. You know what I mean? Like it's such a night and day difference. You'll look back at the person you were walking out the door. Like, I would kick the living shit out of that guy
with ease. I mean, I remember, so like our MMA gym in Cincinnati was, it was in North Side, which at the time now I think is kind of hipster, but back then it was really shitty. And, we would get people just walking in off the street all the time that just like wanted to like spar or something like that. And, it's kind of people where like you kind of just have to, you can't, in that situation, you sort of just have to go with it. And so I remember like, this was a kind of a learning experience for me. Well, so 2 learning experiences there. First of all, so some just random dude walked in the street off the street and wanted to spar. And like, he seemed kind of tough, like the kind of guy that, would like mean mug you at a bus stop and like threaten you and like that sort of dude. And, kind of Eminem type guy, but like, greasier. And, so the coach was just like, all right, you can spar with him, because he was about the same size as me, and like put gloves on the guy. And I fucking beat his fucking ass. Like without even trying. I was going like 20%, and I just fucked him up so bad, and he ran outside and threw up and never came back. And I was like, I did that. And it wasn't even hard. And then, and I was like, all right, I guess I learned something. And then also at the time I was training with a good friend of mine who I still talk to, who was a real gnarly dude. Without airing his business too much, there's a lot of people that have gotten seriously fucked up in a lot of situations because of him. And he ended up going to prison for some of these things. Not the guy to fuck with at all.
Right.
And I trained with him. And one time I was like, let's just do this. Go 100%. And he's like smaller than me, but like one of these like brick shit house type guys, like a Volkanovski type of build, short, but like real stocky, and had been in God fucking knows how many street fights. Like, his big scar from where he got his throat cut and stuff. Like, he has "Trust No Bitch" tattooed on his neck over the scar where he got his throat cut. Like that this is how gnarly this guy is, right? And we just fucking went for it. And like, he got the better of it, but I didn't get dropped. I finished the round going 100%, and I was like, okay. Like, I was like, I didn't die. Like, I was competitive with this guy going 100%. Okay.
Yeah. Dude, those are great, man. Especially when, it's always cool too when it's kind of a compliment when you're like rolling with someone or training with someone, and they're like, oh man, I'm gonna have to start turning it up on you. Yep. It's like, and you're like, I'll take it.
right. I mean, if you make somebody that tough really work for it, if they give it everything they've got and you're still standing, like, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I saw something online the other day, and I kind of just did a solo episode about it, and it was Brad Lee talking about how he tried jiu-jitsu. He's the big influencer guy.
Yeah.
And he talked about how he tried jiu-jitsu and couldn't get over like the sweaty guys touching him and whatnot. And
wait till you find out about North-South, buddy.
Yeah. After a couple of rounds too.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, he's like, it doesn't matter anyways, because I earned my black belt in Ching Ching Pow.
What the fuck is that?
He's like cocking a gun and shooting someone.
Okay.
And I was like, oh Jesus, here we go, man. Like, I'm like, look, if jiu-jitsu is not for
okay,
you,
go to 7-Eleven and next time somebody like shoves you in the parking lot and you shoot them, go for it.
That's what I was gonna say. like, dude, how does that resolve every situation?
Yeah.
Like, in my defense, or in like hindsight 2020, like, I don't think if I'm ever using jiu-jitsu in real life,
something went wrong.
Something went really wrong, right? And my buddy, who is a former, he did like 25 years as an Army Green Beret, and he kind of, to back up Brad Lee's statement, he said, if I'm using jiu-jitsu in real life, it's because everything else had failed leading up to that point, right? But like, it was like just such like douchery the way he said it. Like, what do you think when you hear people that don't train talk about, oh, bro, I'll just see red. It's like, oh, Jesus, man.
Well, cool, except if someone else sees red and they've trained, then you're going to get fucked up.
Like,
and a lot of people, I would say that, the people who actually train, unless they're total psychos, like really never get in street fights, because we've all had that experience of like, you go to open mat and there's some new guy there that looks like a fucking schlub, picking his nose, and then he just fucking rolls you up,
Yeah. I can't trust anyone anymore. I don't know anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, that guy that looks like he just got back from the comic book store, and he's half asleep.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah, just like tapped me 8 times in one round, like without even trying, and then you go to 7-Eleven afterwards and like get a Gatorade or something, and you see some guy at the counter, like, well, what about that guy? See, is that the sleeper build? Is that guy like secretly like Muay Thai champ that could like knock my head off? And the answer is maybe so.
Maybe. I tell my son all the time, I'm like, because he'll talk about like wanting to fight people or whatnot, or at school, he's like, I'll just punch him in the face. I'm like, bro, like, it's not worth it. You don't know who people, like, martial arts are so popular nowadays. Like, you don't know. Jocko talks about, he's like, the first thing I'm going to do in a self-defense situation is run away.
Of course.
He's like, and I tell him that. I'm like, dude, I've been training jiu-jitsu, 6 years or something like that. Like, pretty fit and strong guy. And you are out of your freaking mind if you think I'm going to even give someone the time of day that's trying to confront me in public.
Yeah, of course.
Like, there's no reason to. Not only that, but you could confront the wrong person. They just ching ching pow you. You know what I mean?
Sure. I know people that. Yeah. I mean, I've been aware of some of those situations.
Yeah, and it's like training jiu-jitsu actually. I don't know. I think it was maybe Henry Gracie talked about like the more like you train this stuff, the more you realize like it's not anything you want to mess with.
Yeah.
Like, and I've never trained MMA, so I can only imagine really like what it's like. I've been kicked in the face during hardcore shows before, and I was like, that's not fun.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, but I couldn't imagine like the lessons, how quickly you learn the lesson in like MMA training.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one example of this. Is like we were drilling like elbows once, with like very controlled. We put on elbow pads and like headgear, and we're like, let's just gingerly sort of train some elbows here. And I took one, the dude was maybe going 10% with headgear, and I was just like, I just feel like I got hit in the head with a fucking baseball bat. Let alone so then you see these guys in the UFC taking them to the dome, 20 times in a round, and they don't react. So you think like, oh, it's no big deal. It's a big fucking deal. Trust me. Or like, people getting low kicked and stuff. Like if you've ever been low kicked, like that shit hurts. Like I have like really sharp shins. So like I've dropped people lots of times just with like one low kick in the gym, not even going that hard. And then you see these guys in the UFC taking 50 of them, trust me, that shit hurts.
Forward.
Yeah. Trust me, it hurts. They're such fucking psychos that like, they're not going to show it, but trust me, it hurts. So point being is like, yeah, fighting doesn't feel good. It's not as cool as it looks like in the movies. I mean, even jiu-jitsu, how many times you walk out after class with like a bunch of tough rolls and you're just like, I feel like I'm halfway dead. Like every part of my body is fucked up. Like, what am I even doing on this earth?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing too, that even when you go through those hard rolls or hard sparring matches or whatever, it kind of makes you appreciate like the level of like simplicity or how everything else in life is like so much less stressful in some situations. Like you're like, dude, okay, so I'm, whatever it is at home, or I have this project that's due, or this script to write or whatever. It's like, it's so insignificant compared to like when you're just fighting for your life for an hour on the mat.
Someone's got their fucking sweaty ass rash guard over your face and you can't breathe,
You're like sitting there like, dude, I'm literally having a hard time breathing
yes.
right now. Like, mother's milk is no joke.
Right.
You want to talk about something difficult in life? Have a chest smother you for a solid
it's one of my. I learned that one from Austin. That is one of my favorite moves. If you know if you got mount and someone won't turn to give you a side, do the
Mother's milk.
yep, and then it doesn't matter how tough you are. If you get that smother, they'll turn one way or the other. They'll give you
That's
something.
funny.
But that Brad Lee guy, having that reaction, it's like, to me, like pulling a gun on someone,
It's crazy.
it makes you a pussy. Like, obviously there's a time, like, I'm not anti-gunner. Like, if fine, if you're using it for self-defense and that's what you got to do, totally cool. But like, if you're so much of a pussy that you're going to pull a gun on someone because you can't handle like rolling with a sweaty guy, like, give me a fucking break, man.
Yeah, it shows more insecurity about him as a person
Right.
than anything else.
You can shove your balls in my face all you want. Like, I'm not, go for it, buddy.
It doesn't bother me any. I'll take them.
Yeah, like,
you stamp me, whatever.
Like when if someone's going for like a Kimura from like side control, you're on your side. They've got your arm here. They're legs over your face, balls right, just teabagging you right here.
Yeah.
How many times
funny.
you've been there?
Too many times, unfortunately, and it never smells the same. It's like, God damn it.
It's like, oh, that must be Chris.
That's funny. Hey, well, Finn, I know you gotta head out. You're a busy guy. I like to end the show with the same question every single time. If you could give one piece of advice to a brand new white belt, what would it be and why?
My advice to a brand new white belt would be to listen to the coach, listen to the upper belts. Do not be an asshole. Meaning, if you're like, hey, I keep getting caught with this thing. What am I doing wrong? And they're like, oh, well, the problem is, whatever, your elbows, aren't tight enough. And like, then what you should say is, okay. And then try it. And then listen, do what they say, listen to what they say, and then do it. Don't be like, well, yeah, but as a white belt, if you hear the words, yeah, but coming out of your mouth, that's probably a sign that you should shut up. Right?
Yes.
Like, how many times someone's like, oh, I keep getting caught with this or that. And I'm like, yeah, it's because every single fucking time you do this. Well, I know, but like, all right, well, then keep doing it. I don't care.
Yeah, but I saw a Craig Jones instructional,
Right.
and he said,
cool. Are you Craig Jones?
John Danaher says
Right.
this.
Yeah, if Craig Jones comes in here, he can do whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah, that's funny. Hey, well, if people want to find you and come watch your content, if they've never heard of your stuff before, where can they find you at?
If you just look for my name, Finn Mckenty, on YouTube, I have two channels. Like I said at the beginning, one is called the Punk Rock MBA. One is just called my name. Either of those are good. Or you can go to finnmckenty.com if you're interested in YouTube coaching. I can help you and your business grow on YouTube. You can check that out at my website. And yeah, anybody, if you have any questions about anything or want to talk about whatever, DMs are open and I read all of them.
Perfect. Well, Finn, thank you so much for your time today, man. This was a great conversation. I'm sure we could have gone much longer, but like I mentioned, you gotta head out.
Unfortunately.
So thank you. Hopefully we could do this again maybe in the future. So,
absolutely.
Hey, guys, thank you so much for listening and watching at home. Go follow Finn everywhere. He's got super great content. And remember, no oil checks here. Peace.